Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Today we will talk about the Hamza and how to write the Hamza correctly. There are different ways as we discussed in the last lesson. So the Hamza in the beginning of the word, you write in this. There are three ways to write the Hamza. Now in the beginning of the word to write the Hamza and to know what kind of Hamza is it? Is it Hamza Qata', the disconnecting Hamza, or Hamza Wasl, the connecting one as we discussed in the last lesson? This actually depends on the parts of the speech. And in Arabic parts of the speech, we have the noun, ism, the verb, the فعل, or أحرف. In Arabic, أحرف, the literal translation is letters, but we actually mean by tools, like, for example, preposition tools, to, from, min, ila. So we will come back to discuss the Hamza in the beginning of the word later on in a more advanced level because we need to go into the parts of the speech. But today we will discuss the Hamza in the middle of the word. So, but briefly, in the beginning of the word, when you say a, u, I, this is how you write it. The Hamza, it's on the top, a, with a fatha, and u on the top also with a dhamma. So that will be u. This is a, u, and this is E. When there is a kasra, you write this hamza at the bottom this way. So take another look at it. So this one is A, U, E. Now let's discuss the hamza and how to write it in the middle of the word. There are four ways. You can write it also on the alif, on the waw, on the ya without the dots. Here we call it nabira, and on the line all by itself. And to know how to write it, you have to know the diacritical marks of the hamza itself, and the letter before it. And the diacritical marks, we know there is kasra, dhamma, fatha, sukun. And the most powerful of the marks or harakat is the kasra, followed by the kasra, followed by the dhamma, then fatha, then sukun. Now, why am I telling you this? Because the kasra, the best way to represent the hamza with the kasra I is to write it on the nabira. The best way to represent the hamza u with the dhamma is to write it on the waw, and the best way to represent the hamza, the fatha, is to write it on the alif just like this. Okay, we will come back to this again. Now, let's just take one example before we go into the details. So, looking at this word, I broke it down for you. So, this is the incorrect way of writing it. So, su, I, la. Now we look at the hamza, we see that there is kasra on it. We look at the letter before it, we see that there is a dhamma on it. Now we know from the rule of power that the kasra is more powerful than the dhamma. That means you should write the hamza on the nabira. So this is how it should look. Su, I, la, su'ila. Okay. Now when do we write it? When do we write it on the alif like this? We look at in those two conditions right here. So the first one, when you look at the hamza and you see there's a fatha or a sukun on it, and in the previous letter there is a fatha. So the fatha is equal in power to the fatha before it. So you just go ahead and write it on the alif. Or if there's a sukun on the hamza, it is weaker than the fatha on the letter before. That means the fatha on the letter before prevails. So you go ahead also and write it on the alif. And the second rule, if there's fatha on the hamza and on the letters before there's a sukun or a fatha, So that means also that the fatha prevails. And you go ahead also and write it this way on the alif. Okay, so here's an example. Sa'ala. So looking at the Hamza, there is a fatha here. The letter before there's a fatha. They're equal in power. You go ahead and write the Hamza on the alif this way. Sa'ala. Okay? Sa'ala. Now the second example. Yes. Yes. Alu. Yes. Alu. And as you can see here, there is the fatha on the hamza, there's sukoon on the letter before it. The fatha is more powerful, so you go ahead and write it on the alif. Yes, alu. Yes, alu. Now the third example, ras. As you can see, there's a sukoon here, there's a fatha here. The fatha on the previous letter prevails. You go ahead and write the hamza on the alif. Ras. Okay. Now, when do we write it on the nabira? As it looks like a ya without the dots, it's called a nabira. So there are three rules. If the hamza, looking at the hamza and letter before it, if the hamza itself has a kasra, that's it. Kasra prevails. If the letter before it has a kasra, that's it. Kasra prevails. If the hamza, regardless of the harakat on it, but preceded by a ya with a sukoon, you go ahead and write the hamza also on a nabira. So the first example, wu'ida, wu'ida. As you can see, there's a kasra here. That's it. It prevails. You go ahead and write it on a nabira like this. Wu'ida, wu'ida. Okay. The second example, ji'ta. As you can see, there is sukun here. There is kasra. On the previous letter, that's it. The kasra prevails. Go ahead and write it on a nabira. Ji'ta. Okay. Now, this example, the third one, musi, musi, un, musiun. So you just look at the hamza and the letter before it. So the hamza has a dhamma right here, and the letter before it is a ya with a sukoon. You just go ahead, because of the ya with a sukoon, you go ahead and write it on a nabira. So it should look like this. Musi un. Musi un. Okay. I hope it's clear so far. And another example. So as we can see here, sa, I, ma. The hamza has a kasra. That's it. It prevails. Go ahead and write it on a nabira. Sa, I, ma. That way. Sa, I, ma. Okay. Now, sa, sa, il, sa'il. So the hamza has a kasra. That's it. It prevails. And you go ahead and write it on the nabira like this. Sa'il. Okay. Now, when we do we write the hamza on the waw? And there are two rules in general. So when the hamza, if you look at the hamza, there's a dhamma, and if the letter before it has either a dhamma, so it's equal in power, or something less in power like a fatha or a sukoon, so the dhamma on the hamza prevails, and the appropriate way to write it then would be on this way, like on the waw. Okay. And the other rule is that when, for example, on the hamza there is there is a dhamma, a fatha or a sukoon, and the letter before it has a dhamma. So um, so the most powerful of the harakat is the letter the dhamma on the letter before, because it's stronger than the sukoon or the fatha on the hamza, and it's equal to the dhamma on the hamza. That means you go ahead and write the hamza on the waw. Let's take an example. Ku'us, ku'us. As you can see here, there is a dhamma on the hamza. The letter before it, there is also a dhamma right here. So they're equal in the power. So you go ahead, the most appropriate for that is to write the hamza on the waw. So this is how it should look like. Ku'us, ku'us. Now the second example, Ra'uf. As you can see on the hamza itself, there is a dhamma, and on the previous letter there's a fatha. The dhamma is more powerful than the fatha, so you go ahead and write the hamza on the waw, and it should look like this. Ra'uf, Ra'uf. Okay, let's look at this example. Mas'ul, mas'ul. So if you look at the hamza, there is a dhamma. The letter before it, the sin, has a sukoon. The dhamma is more powerful than the sukoon. You go ahead and write it on the waw. Mas'ul. Okay. Now, this example, su'al, su'al. You can see the hamza, there's a fatha. The letter before the sin has a dhamma, and the fatha is more powerful. So you go ahead and sorry, the dhamma is more powerful, yeah, on the sin. That means you go ahead and use the more appropriate way, which is the hamza written on the waw. So this is how it should look like. Su'al, because the scale is kasra dhamma fatha sukun. Kasra being the most powerful. Kasra dhamma fatha sukun. Now, when do we write it on the line alone? These are actually exceptions. So let's take the two exceptions we have. This word tasa'ala. If you want to follow the rules that we talked about, you look at the hamza. It has a fatha here, and the letter before it, this alif, it has a sukoon. So as we know in the power, kasra dhamma, fatha sukoon, that means the fatha is more powerful than the sukoon, and the appropriate sign or the appropriate way would be to write the hamza on an alif. So if you follow this rule, this is how the word should look like. The sa la. But in Arabic, we do not like seeing two alifs like this in succession. Doesn't look appealing. So we go ahead and just remove the alif and write the hamza on the line, which means that the word will look like this. تساءل. Okay. Now the other exception is when the hamza has a fatha. The hamza has a fatha and it's preceded by a waw with a sukoon. You always have to write the hamza on the line. So let's take this example. Yasu'aka. Yasu'aka. So looking at the hamza, there's a fatha here, and there's a waw with the sukoon right here. That means you should keep the hamza on the line, and it will look like this. Yasu'aka. I hope that's clear enough. If you find this content useful, please do not forget to like, subscribe, and share.